was born in Akron, Ohio, and my dad was killed before my 8th birthday by a drunk college student. Mom was a widow at 29 with 4 kids, and we lived on $222.22. That's not a lot of money back in the 50s and 60s. Now, it's very low money now, but we managed to survive, and Mom was always pushing me. And the biggest issue was my dad was killed on June 14th, 1956. His burial at the Arlington National Cemetery, which is our big military simulator, was a week later. And Dad's company, he was in the Ohio Guard, drove all the way from Akron all the way to Washington, D.C. to march behind. And they asked me, as an 8-year-old, did I want to carry the guide on? So I marched with his whole company carrying the guide on because I'd done it before because I'd go to guard meetings with him and I knew how to march. And that was very impactful for a young kid. I knew that I wanted to do what Dad would have wanted me to do. Dad was a navigator in World War II and then an infantry officer in Korea, but he always wanted to be the pilot, not the navigator. So right then I knew what I was going to go do. And it was quite an upbringing, but my mom was always motivating me. And I was lucky because I was the oldest, and Mom was focused on me doing well. And I didn't play sports. I was a fat, gangly, smart kid. And I had straight A's, but I didn't do anything but work on my chemistry sets and my science kits and build radios. Must have built 100 radios. I was listening to Radio Albania when I was 13 years old, and I had all these wires across the back. But I loved all that science stuff. I was kind of a geek.
How did you process that loss as a child? Were you an angry child? It sounds like you were a very focused child. How did that shape your adolescence with your father gone?
I knew I had to get a job done, but there were no sports. I didn't have any sports because Mom didn't know anything about it and Dad wasn't there. So I joined something called the Civil Air Patrol, which is a civilian thing where you put on a uniform and you pretend like you're to go look for German submarines. And I had a cadet uniform, and I was going to try and get more kids to join that in my little town of Winchester, Virginia, because Mom, that was halfway between Baltimore, where her mom was, and Akron, where Dad's mom was. And we went back and forth and stopped in Winchester. So anyway, I went to the radio station to make a pitch to get the other kids in, and I came out, 12 guys jumped me and beat the crap out of me. So Mom hired the next door neighbor kid, bought boxing gloves, and had him beat me up every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months. And at the 3rd month, he quit. And I said, Mom says, "Why did you quit?" He says, "Bill's hitting too hard." But my mom remarried when I was a senior in high school to a West Point graduate. And I asked Dad, my stepdad, well, what did I think he'd do? Because both Air Force and West Point, the Air Force Academy and the West Point were talking to me about joining. And he says, well, we're face to face with the enemy. We're bayonets, man. We eat K rations. I said, what do the guys in the Air Force do, Dad? He goes, those bums go drop some bombs, go back to the club and drink. I said, I'm going Air Force. I didn't get in the first year. It took me 2 years to get in. So you had to have a congressman that you had some influence on. And my congressman had another kid, and he went to the academy the year I wanted to go, and I joined the U.S. Army. And then they made me take a test. And when I did well on the test, they said, would you rather go to college? I said, And they gave me a 4-year ROTC scholarship. They paid for room, board, and everything, and gave me $100 a month. I thought, this is a good deal. So I went to a military school that wasn't the Air Force Academy for 1 year, and I got the appointment the next year.
And it was at high school, I understand, that you got your taste for some of the very first helicopter simulations ever made. How did that happen?
I won a National Science Foundation competition, and they said, would you like to go to school for the summer and learn more about this? And I went to the National Science Foundation. I went 4 weeks in Roanoke, Virginia, where we studied aeronautics, and I'm a 10th grader. And then they sent me to the Army Signal Research and Development Labs in New Jersey, and I flew Cobra helicopters and simulators for the next 6 weeks. And I learned how simulations worked. And they were also playing a Star Trek game on the mainframe, so I was doing that too.
Did these simulations have a visual element? This is in the 60s, presumably. Did they, or was this an instrument simulation? How did they work?
Well, we actually had two. Well, we had multiple ways, but one of them, the most boring, was we had two simulators hanging from the ceiling, and they looked like helicopters. You had all the instruments, and you flew around like this, trying to get in each other's position, shoot each other down. And that was not testing; that was goofing. But they had those things, but it was mostly math and programming and wind tunnels and all that kind of stuff.
Your ambition was to fly fighter aircraft in combat, wasn't it?
Well, wait a minute. I get through the academy, and and at 4 years, I have a 3.8 in engineering. I am told I can't go to pilot training because I have 20/50 vision. You need perfect vision. So guess what I did? I memorized the eye charts, baby. And I went down. I asked for one more eye exam. I went down there, and we have flight surgeons. They're the surgeons that deal with the Air Force. And he says, "Read line 8A." I went, "Whoop." He goes, "Cadet, did you memorize this chart?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did," because you can't lie. He says, "That's really smart. You're so dedicated. Go ahead and go to pilot training. Take your classes." So I went to pilot training with glasses. The only guy in my class with glasses. And I went there, and I was top 10% of my class. I had one bad flight for being overly aggressive. I want to be a fighter pilot. How can I be overly aggressive? Because I would, I don't know. I know you don't know what a vertical recovery is, but they put the airplane up like this and let it stall and say, "Good luck, recover." And you have to roll it flat, pull it down, press the stick in so you're not going down further, and rip it back up. So I go boom, boom, boom. And he goes, "That was impressive. Can you do it again?" I go boom, boom, boom. And he grounds me. He was leaving the Air Force the next day, and he wanted to get an academy grad. And he grounded me for being overly aggressive. I thought I did it perfect, but I still graduated top 10% of the class. But then I was trying to go to a fighter. We only had two fighters because you get to choose at the end of your pilot training, a year's training, where you're going. And I chose an F4, but there weren't any now. So they gave me a T-38 to be an instructor pilot. And then one of my classmates who told me he was going to take a transport, I took that 38. So I ended up in T-37s that I taught for 5 years flying. We do, but the issue, what happened to me after pilot training, I got assigned after my instructor pilot years, I got assigned to an F4. I am so excited. And I come back and they tell me I'm going to Dover, Delaware. I said, "I didn't know they have F4s at Dover, Delaware." He says, "No, they got C5As.
Well, just before we get to that, I have got some questions from viewers lined up. And one of them comes from Declan Sweeney. He asks, and you can jump ahead if you need to here, how many of the MicroProse simulated aircraft have you got to fly?
Not very many of them because I only flew in the Air Force. And I flew the T-38, T-37, C-5A, O-2A, and A-37. The O-2 and the A-37 were forward air controllers. There's a movie called Bat-21. Look it up. It's about the O-2, which is that engine in the front, engine in the back. And we shot rockets and called in the fighters. We call it the smallest fighter with the biggest gun because we'd have 4 F-4s doing what we told them to do.
If you want to avoid wild bills, then head to PCBWay.com. Work with me here, it's the best I've got. We can't all be as cool as Wild Bill, but we can pretend with things like the RC Plane project available in the shared projects at PCBWay.com. PCBWay offer everything from PCB services, obviously, to CNC milling and 3D printing. Check out their website to help you with your own project, and we thank them for supporting the museum and the channel.
So we didn't have much weapons ourselves, but we could bring the F-4s in on you.
And while you were there, did you get to see military simulations improve as well? Did you see any of that or not really?
Well, we certainly saw it in pilot training. We had simulators all the time in the pilot training world. I went to some more schools for O2 and A-37s, and they had simulators. The one time I got sick was in a simulator, a C-5 simulator, because they had me sitting sideways like this, and the airplane's doing like this. And they had a good simulator. They didn't move much because it's a big old thing, but I'm sitting sideways and looking like this, and I go, I have to press the emergency button and jump out and use the trash can. I'm going, how embarrassing, because I never got sick when we were stalling the airplane, rolling all around, but the simulator got to me. So the commander, the military airlift command, comes to Dover because morale was awful because we were getting 2 takeoffs and landings every month, and that was it because the the wings of the C5 were falling off. It was a big scandal at the time. So he comes in and he's there to increase the morale. And he gives his little pitch. He says, "Any questions?" Well, it is dumb for an Air Force captain to ask a 3-star any questions. But being the idiot I am, I ask him a question. "Sir, how long are we going to be stuck in C5s?" He looks at me. You can see the steam coming out of his ears. He goes, "Captain, you're not going to be stuck one more minute." I'm going, "Oh, crap." So I get called to the wing commander's office, and I'm offered Thule, Greenland, or the reserves. So I picked the reserves, and then they blocked me from the reserves. I fight with that general for 6 months, and finally my congressman in Delaware, who's going to be the new government, asked the general to come to Washington and explain why this guy with perfect AORs, top of his class in pilot training and at the Air Force Academy, can't be in his reserve unit. And the general relents, and that's when I find the Air National Guard out of Pennsylvania and start flying the O2. So when I get out, 7 years after active duty, 1977, instead of going to Texas, we already had a house that we owned in Delaware. I'm getting ready to land one of my last C5 trips, and my aircraft commander, who's was 1 year ahead of me to get academy, he was class of 69, I was class of 70. He says, "Bill, what kind of lawyer are you going to be?" Since I was trying to get a law, I said, "Well, I don't know. What kind of lawyers are there?" Because I really didn't know. No one in my family had been a lawyer. I just figured they're the ones that drove the Cadillacs in my little hometown of Winchester, Virginia. So I figured it's either that or a Radio Shack store. That's my two options. So he says, "You need to put on your best suit and we'll go up to the Horton School." Now, I thought Horton was a coffee brand in Canada. So I put on, believe it or not, I had a blue leisure suit, a powder blue leisure suit. And a white fluffy shirt, and I go up there. They laugh their butts off when I show up at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, and they give me a scholarship because I got 2 kids, and I can fly with the Guard on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to make extra money. And the ex went to work as a nurse, so I went to the Wharton School, which is the top MBA school in America, and got a degree in finance. And that was 18 months. It's normally 2 years, but we had small kids. I didn't take the summer off. I went to school. And I graduated at the top of my class, too. And I got 52 job offers when I got out. So I decided to go the consulting route. So I worked for a consulting firm right in New York City. And we lived in the Princeton, New Jersey area. And I rode the bus every day. Now, right now I'm 5'11", but at 6'1", that bus seat was so small. I'm sitting there like, and it's 6:30 to 8 o'clock every morning. I have to get on that bus. It was awful, but I did it for a year, and then I did some good projects. I saved a steamship company $150 million. So I get great canoes. I get a $10,000 bonus, and when you're making 26,000, 10,000 bonus is a big deal. And at the end of that first year, I checked the employment ads all the time because I'm in New York City. There's lots of opportunities. And I say, wanted, junior military officer, MBA from a good school that knows about transportation. I'm going, well, that could be me. And I applied for the job, and it was a friend of the steamship company that I had done work for who was looking for somebody to do for him what I did for them. And the ad was put specifically in there for me. And I went to the world for the richest guy in America at the time. He'd started the Sea Land Service, which is he invented containerization for steamships. Before it was just big nets and you drop things in. No, he invented containerization with clean trucking. And it was a good learning. I traveled the world first class, lived in all first class places, including in London, famous thing down there right next to Hyde Park, the famous hotel down there. I had a $4,000 suite. I'm going, I don't need that. I just want a room and brush my teeth and go to bed. But Malcolm didn't go little. And I finally, 2 things caused me to leave the steamship business. One, they asked me to do a temple tour. People from the Far East were coming. They wanted to find some girls, and I was supposed to arrange them for them. And I said, no, thank you. I don't do that. So that was my first No, because that's not what an Air Force Academy graduate wants to do. That's crude and rude. I don't want to do that. But anyway, I went on the steamship business. So the second time, I get called to the chairman's office, and I see him looking out the window, and there are 9 FBI cars behind one giant limo. And I won't tell you his name, but he was the president of the Longshoremen's Association. And of course, we had to deal with longshoremen because we were in the steamship business. And they started talking about bribes. And I said, "Sir, I don't feel good." I left the room because I didn't want to be part of that. And I called the consulting firm, McKinsey, and they said, "Yes, we'd like you. We tried to hire you out of business school. Come on to McKinsey." So I left that day because I do have some standards. And went to McKinsey and found out I wasn't a very good consultant. Why wouldn't I be a good consultant? Consulting is it's like a lawyer. They want to make it bigger. Not me. I want it done today.
So you go to General Instruments. What's your role specifically at General Instruments when you go there?
I'm the number 3 executive. I'm the director of strategic planning, which means I do all the spreadsheets, all the balance sheets, all the cash flows for 5 years for 5 divisions with 5 different assumptions. So my boss, Jack DeFries, who was one of the people that invented Fortran, by the way, so he was a brilliant guy, but he's 65 years old when I go to work for him. He has his assistant give me a big green piece of paper like he did on accounting on this big green pad and a roll of number 2 pencils, and he gives me the assumptions I'll see in 6 months. I'm at an office like 2 down from him because he figured, and I'm a smart, lazy person. He probably didn't know that. So I went looking for a way to do this better. And I'd heard of this thing called VisiCalc. You ever heard of VisiCalc?
Yes, yeah, first spreadsheet, yeah.
Yeah, and Dan Bricklin was a friend of mine. Ended up being Dan had invented VisiCalc. And I heard about it before I really knew Dan, and I went to a computer store, and I found this really funny-looking computer called a Trash 80. And it had a gray screen and black letters, or black screen and gray letters. I'm going, wow. Next to it was this brown computer that had some kind of fruit with a bite out of it. And it's got 4 colors and 16K of memory. I'm going, wow. And right next to it, I hear, I go, what is that? He goes, that's a toy computer. I said, will it do VisiCalc? He goes, remember, we're going to have fun. He says, yes, but it's a toy computer. I said, well, how much memory is that? He said, well, if you put the basic cards, you can get 64K. I went, I'll take that one. So I bought an Atari 800. So I go back and do all the income statements, financial projections, cash flow. And about a month later, because I'm a smart, lazy boy, I take it to my boss. He goes, you finished this already? I go, yes, sir. He says, well, I don't like these things. Change these and I'll see you in a month. I came back in 2 hours. He says, what? You got it done? I said, sir, I'm using a computer. You're a computer company. They were a computer company. And they didn't use any kind of form of spreadsheet. And he was very impressed. And so there was this group there in the back, and the engineering group was called Smuggers. Now, what do you think Smuggers stands for? Sid Meier's User Group. So I go back there, and I found out Sid is borrowing software. He's not stealing it. He says he's just looking at it. Now, in the Air Force Academy, that was called quibbling. So I couldn't do anything with Sid.
First impression of Sid when you first met him. What was your first impression?
He's cheating. He's cheating.
Okay. Wasn't a good first impression then.
And he only wears a Michigan t-shirt. I'm wearing a collar pin and a suit and a vest, and he's in a sweatshirt. He wore something that said University of Michigan on it the whole time. I got one picture of him. He put a tie on. I said, we're going to go to New York, talk to the investment banker. So he comes here with his Michigan sweatshirt on, his jeans on, and a white shirt with a tie hanging on a hanger. I said, forget it. You be the brilliant software guy. I'll be the dumb business guy. We'll just go. And the investment bankers thought that was cool because that was something they could sell. So we're going to fast forward a few months. and I wouldn't have anything to do with Sid, but I was still doing my computer and anything they needed because I was the one that put together every 3 months we went to New York and explained where we were and why we didn't do better last quarter. 3 months later, we're at a sales conference in Las Vegas. Sid says, "Bill, I know where there's some games. Let's get out of here." I'm going, I've been sitting there all day. It's 4 o'clock and they're going to go till 6. I'm going, okay. And we snuck out the back and went downstairs and we sit down. We start playing video games and he watches me play and I watch him play because we're trying to have doing this little thing together. And I sit down and score 75,000 points in the Red Baron game from Atari. Sid sits down and scores 1,000 points. I am. I said, Sid, how'd you do that? He said, well, I watched you play. I memorized the algorithms. I said, you did what? And I had $1 on the game. And I hate losing my dollars.
We have got a question on this topic from viewer Sander. He says that he heard that you and Sid actually bought a Red Baron arcade cabinet. Is that true? Do you still have it?
We didn't buy it. The company bought it and gave it to us at a Christmas party. We had a family company. We really did well there.
So you and Sid are bonding here over your shared.
Well, no.
No, you're not bonding. No. You're competing.
No, we're competing. So he says, I can write a better game in a week. Well, I'm flying for the Guard. I'm flying A-37s. I'm trying to blow up New Jersey. I need a bigger bombs. The damn place is still there. So I can't be outbragged because he said he could write a better game in a week. So I said, well, if you could, I could sell it. Because Sid had told me he'd sold 4 games for $800. I didn't think that was going to pay for my car payments, So, of course, we got outbragged. So about a month later, it wasn't a week, he brought me a game. He said, here, this is a game I said I could do. So I'm going, oh, my God, I'm in trouble. So I went home and played it, and I wrote him a 4-page memo of all the things were wrong from an aviator standpoint. I figured that's the end of that. Remember, I'm wearing the 3-piece suit with a collar pin, Sid's in his jeans. I was considerably taller than Sid. He comes up behind me one day and shakes the bottom of my sports coat because I'm talking to somebody. Yes, Sid. He says, I fixed all those things you said. I went, well, damn, now I got to go sell it. And I took it to a computer store on a trip back from New York because our headquarters was in New York. I got off in Rahway. Then there was a computer store right there next to the railroad station. And I went in precisely about 5 minutes to 9. I figured that was the best time because they were getting ready to close. And I said to the guy, I said, I have an excellent new game called Hellcat Ace. I'd like to show it to you. He says, kid, I got lots of games. I said, how about just 5 minutes? We sat and played for 2.5 hours. And he said, okay, I'll take 100. I went, I said, well, how? They're $29.95 because everything else is $29.95. He goes, kid, you don't understand. I'm retail. I get half off. Oh. And I had to call Sid and said, Sid, how many copies of this game you got? He says, 2. You got 1. I got 1. I said, we need 98 more. And we got the next door neighbor kid putting them in the Atari, 2 drives, making them. And that was the kid's job for a year.
And at this point, there's no such thing as MicroProse. This is just you going in a store with a disc at this point.
No, we decided to in September. So this was August when he got the game to me. That we decided we were going to make a company and we were going to call it Smuggers. And then he says, nah, let's call it Prose because I'm writing prose for microcomputers. MicroProse. That's how that came about. But we were going to make enough money to be able to charge our cars off to the tax service. That's all we were trying to do. And I think I did over $1 million telemarketing, going to computer stores, putting my flight suit on. And we sold Chopper Rescue the following February to CBS for $50,000. That was a big deal for us. He did Hellcat Ace and my favorite, Floyd of the Jungle. And my 3 kids, I now had 3, they love Floyd of the Jungle because you can use 4 joysticks on an Atari 800.
Of course, it's got 4 ports. Yeah.
So we had a great time playing it. And often if it happened, same thing with Pirates when he came out with Pirates. So we started MicroProse. I did $1 million. It was just him and I and my ex-wife. And we found a distributor out of Boston who ended up being a venture capitalist. And he told me, he got credit because I wasn't taking credit from anybody before. Jerry Alacinco, he says, I'm a distributor. I get 50% off. I sell them to retail for 40% off. That retailer, he lied to me. He said he got 50% off. They got 40% off. And he says, and I get credit and I want 500 of them. I went, what? How are we going to do 500? That's when I found somebody to really start duplicating the discs. And we did very well that first year.
So with the forming of MicroProse, were you and Sid, were you equal partners? What was the setup there?
Yeah, we were equal partners. But fun thing about Sid is he didn't want to have anything to do with the business. Zero zippo. And he only made comments that always made me think. So I finally decided it's time to have an office and hire a few people because we're doing pretty well. So I had a little office about 3 blocks from where we were at General Instrument. And it's a really small space. And he wants someplace for him and one of his guys that was going to come over and start helping us convert it to the Commodore 64. And I said, Sid, what do you think would happen if I put these 2 desks together? He looks at me, he looks at the left desk, looks at the right desk. He says, then mate. So that's the kind of advice he gave me. Now, one time he did very well. So the next year I have to hawk my car because we got 3 employees and I have a Volvo, and we only did $27 in July of the next summer because summer's a tough time, and we hadn't put anything out new since I think we did a game the first of the year. So I hawk my car for $15,000, and I pay salaries, and I go to our first consumer electronics show, Sid and I, in Chicago. And a company called Hessware offers $150,000 to license Solo Fight. I'm ecstatic because Sid can go make something else. And I go in to tell Sid about it afterwards because they call me after we get back home. He says, as I'm walking out, he says, I hired this Wharton MBA to make those decisions. I go, thank you, Sid. He hired me to do that. Thank you. So I'm walking out and he goes, but I always heard you don't sell the family jewels. Damn. So I didn't sell it, and Hessware went bankrupt 2 months later. And Solo Fight, I took it to Sears buyers at Handelman and Lieberman, and we sold 25,000 to them. And that's really started us off going. I think we're $3 million in 3 years in annual sales.
Are there any other sort of names that were there at the start that helped out at the start? I mean, Andy Hollis is a name that comes up.
Yeah. Grant Arani was there.
Yeah. Where did they fit in? What were they doing?
Sid wouldn't do the Commodore 64. And the Commodore 64 was the one that was doing better. And they were guys that were in the tech department over at General Instrument. And Sid says, they know how to do the Commodore 64. And we brought them over and we paid them a nice commission and paid them for doing it. And they were the people that would take Sid's work. Because I think he worked on the Atari 800 for the first 4 or 5 years. And everybody had to convert it to whatever else we wanted to do. But Sid wouldn't even put his paychecks. Like the 3rd year, we could give ourselves a little paycheck. And I started paying Sid. I'd have to go to his house and get his paycheck off the top of his refrigerator and put it in myself. 3 months, he wouldn't put his paycheck. He didn't care. He was still working at GI. I had left GI, and he's still at GI because he's not convinced we got a real business yet.
Right. Yeah, because this is a new industry. This is an exciting time. It must have felt like a gold rush, maybe, being just such a new, fresh industry. Is that how it felt to you?
Well, we knew what's Williams' first name? Sierra Online. The Williams.
Ken. Yeah.
Ken and Roberta. And we met them at some trade show. And I met the people who did the original Microsoft golf game, and they did a game called Beachhead. And they were a bunch of Mormons out of Salt Lake City. And they sold their game to Microsoft as the first Microsoft flight simulator that they did a little bit later, not Beachhead, another game they did. So we were starting to know people in the industry. Atari went bankrupt in 82 or 83. So we're in the middle of companies going bankrupt. Atari went bankrupt. Holy mackerel. It was risky, but I figured, hey, I went to the Air Force Academy, made it through the obstacle course. I can do this. But my theory in life is 1, giggle, to be friendly, be nice, but never ever give up. You have to have that as an entrepreneur. Never ever, because there were a lot of times we didn't have enough money to pay payroll, and I had to find a way to do it. So I'd go out and go to a computer store and sell more and tell them, well, this weekend we can't give credit. And that's how I'd pay for it. I'd show up at computer stores and sit there from 10 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, just in my flight suit, yelling and screaming and going, oh, I got it out. Blah, 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 blah. It was great fun and people appreciated it. And you know how I really got that going is when that year right after Sid and I started doing telemarketing at night. So I'd call a computer store and ask them if they had Hellcat Ace. And then when they tell me they didn't have it, I'd tell them, well, they were a bad computer store. It's never coming in because that's the best game I've ever seen to review in an antique magazine. And I'd hang up. I'd call them 3 weeks in a row and give them the same crap. And the fourth week I call back, this is John Stealey calling from MicroProse. We've got this game called Hellcat Ace. They go, we get lots of orders. Can we have 100? Hey,
they don't teach that in school.
No, I'm an entrepreneur, man. I'm trying to sell something. I've never been in sales before. I'm learning all this.
Yeah. And you're becoming established. You're becoming well known with things like Hellcat Ace for simulations. Was it you specifically that was pushing for simulation games at the forefront, or was that just the programmers you had, the way it fell?
No, I'm still flying for the Guard.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, Sid, I want to fly the F-15. We need an F-15 game. And by the way, Tom Clancy said there's this new thing coming called the F-19. And I had Arnold Hendrick, one of the best game designers in the world, and poor Arnold's not with us anymore. But he came out of the Dungeons and Dragons world. And he's the one that wrote those 300-page manuals. Arnold was great, okay, because he did all the early game designs, F-15, F-19, gunship, silent service, he did them all. And he wrote those 300-page manuals. Very intense guy. And I still have on my computer his 22 folders on how to do this game and this game and this game, because he was very organized. So I wanted to do the military sims, and Sid wanted to do whatever Sid wanted to do. So Solo Flight came out of me flying.
You're talking about classified information. We're going to a Commodore user magazine in 1984. You're saying that you had to get the manuals and the games cleared because they contain, or so that they don't contain classified information. How much of this is marketing, Wild Bill, and how much of this is genuine national security concern? Be honest with me here.
I don't know. But I always turned it over to some of my, because I was working at the Pentagon now, and I was working for the chairman of the Joint Staff,
Okay.
General Vesey. And he'd call me in his office periodically because he says, Major, you're the only civilian I know. What do they think about this? So the 4-star general calls the major in to talk about the civilian world because everybody else is military around him. And then he says to me, I've decided you need to go find out if that Army Guard's really up to their business, because he came from the Army Guard.
Okay.
So he sends me out to fly helicopters for a year. You know what happens when an Air Force guy goes to fly helicopters with the Army guys? They try and scare the poo out of you. And they were dogfighting with those Apaches, and they were backing into trees. I'm going, guys, okay, I'm convinced you're good, because they had boring jobs like bankers, lawyers, magazine producers, publishers, and they wanted to be cool on weekends. And I said, General Vesey, they're ready to go, sir. You just give them the word and they're ready to go. He says, thank you, Major. And Vesey wrote some nice reviews for me. So there you go. So let's go back a few minutes, because we get through F-15 and now we're doing something. And guess who offers me a lot of money? He's a famous British entrepreneur billionaire. Now, who could that be? That started his own game company that came and went in about 4 years.
Oh, not Mr. Branson, not Richard Branson.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We negotiated for 2 days, and I was too stupid to say yes. We were doing $8 million in sales, and he wanted to pay me like $50 million, and I went, no, we're worth much more than that. What an idiot!
What year would this conversation have been happening?
88, whenever a year before he started his Virgin game business, and I was too stupid to say yes. I should have said yes and go on the PGA Tour and play golf. except I wasn't that good.
Wow, what a moment! What a moment!
Well, that was not the first not the first time I had a big offer like that. I'm not it was the first time, but I had others. Uh, so uh, Trip Hawkins and I were competing with each other. And Trip says, I got a great idea. Let's combine the companies. I'll do the sports games, you do the military games. But he wanted to be the CEO, and I was just going to be there working on the games. So we could never come to agreement. But we weren't really friends, but we were acquaintances who thought each other were doing good work. How about we leave it to there? I did walk into his office one day, and he wasn't expecting this. I'm here for my next game. Bill, what are you doing here? So anyway, I'm now dealing with Sega because I've got a Japanese office. I put an American citizen of Japanese heritage who lived in Hawaii, who was, when I was invited over to be the keynote speaker at a Japanese Software Publishers Association meeting to talk about distribution, because they really hadn't come to America and they want somebody who knew distribution. And I only knew distribution because I hired a 65 years old guy who I thought was ancient. He taught me the distribution business, and he really got us going. And so I was invited, I think it's 87 or so, to go over, 88, somewhere there, to go to Japan to be at this convention. And I talked to them all about distribution and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm supposed to leave the next day, and they paid for everything. First class to Japan and back. They said, Mr. Stealey, we've delayed your flight for a day. They didn't ask me. They just told me. I said, what are we doing? He says, we heard you like to play golf, and we've established a golf trip. Oh, well, that's nice. They said, we'll pick you up at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock the next morning, a limo shows up, and I go to a 747, and I'm escorted by two lovely young Japanese ladies. I'm going, I don't know what's going on here, but we're going to have fun. So they're the stewardess. There were 24 guys on this thing. Every one of them had a stewardess. And each stewardess, brought us drinks and whatever else we wanted. So we fly all the way down to the southern island. And my interpreter, Conrad Kazawa, misses the flight.
Oh, no.
And the Japanese guys, most of them spoke English, but they didn't want to appear that they spoke English,
right?
Because they thought it wasn't good enough. So I'd say something, they go, ooh, but they knew what I was saying. Yeah. And they wouldn't come back and tell me anything.
Right.
Gotta get rid of this. So anyway, they all take your clothes off. I'm going, I thought we were playing golf, and they get these little washcloths and a little stool, and they walk in this room. It's got 24 shower heads, about shoulder high, and they all sit down and turn them on, and 24 girls coming in and rub their backs because they're taking a bath before they play golf.
Wow.
And the whistle blows and the girls leave and they all jump in the pool. I'm going, wow, that's a good way to start golf. And they all get dressed, so I get dressed for golf, and they even found some golf shoes for me and everything, and clubs. And so we go out, we play 9 holes, and the lady who is our caddy is got to be 100 years old, and she's pushing a rickshaw with 4 bags on it, and she goes and puts the red flags down. Each one of us had a color, and mine was red, and that's because I was the guest. That's where my ball was. So all 24 of us played golf. We went back, and we had another bath. And we go back, and I figure that's it for the day. Thank you very much, guys. They said, oh, no, we're going to pick you up in another hour. I said, what are we doing? He said, oh, we're going karaoke. And we karaoke until 6:30 the next morning. I am wasted and gone. And I end up hiring the interpreter to be the head of MicroProse Japan. We ended up with 30 people over there. And then we went to visit Sega at one time because we were talking about the Sega Genesis. And that's where Trip and I got back together.
Okay.
So I'm in Sega's office. Mr. Nakayama is there, and he's got 6 guys there. 2 of them are interpreters, and these 2 kids keep looking around the window at the door. And he keeps going, and he pretends not to speak English. And finally he says, God damn it, go away. We're having a conference here. So he says, what do you say you're famous? What are you famous for? I said, well, we make great games, sir. He says, well, what games are you famous for? And I went through some of the games, and he says, well, good for you. We'll go to dinner. I'll eat the live stuff. You eat the dead stuff. I'll bring the girls. And at 9 o'clock, he gets up and says, "Okay, girls, time to go." And he leaves with the girls. And again, I go karaokeing for all night long. So now, fast forward to a year or so, and Tripp tries to do the Sega Genesis without paying Sega
Yes,
a
he's doing the
license.
clean room reverse engineering. Yes.
Yes. But Mr. Nakayama calls me on the phone. He says, "Bill, yes, sir. Tripp is stealing my games." I said, and he says, "I'm going to sue him," because Tripp tried to get me to put $5 million in so we could both do it together. And I told him again, that's quibbling, that's cheating. I'm not going to do that. I probably should have if we'd made money. So I said, "Well, I'll get to Tripp." And so I got Tripp and Nakayama on the phone, and they made a deal where EA was paying half the royalty everybody else was. You're welcome, Tripp. So then on one of the games we put EA headquarters that you could blow up at the end of the game. I don't think anybody ever found it, but that was like Strike Eagle 3. So we knew where it was. We'd go blow up EA headquarters just for fun.
I'm just going to take you from Japan to Britain, if you don't mind, just the British connection, because we did get a lot of your games early on, like games like Solo Flight distributed by US Gold. Now, were you aware of the appetite? Go ahead.
Before US Gold, I was selling directly to one of your drugstores that had games in it. Who would that be?
Boots.
Yeah.
Boots, yeah.
And then Jeff, what was Jeff's name from US Gold?
Brown, was it?
It could have been. He called me and said, "I can do a better job." So great. So he has our next couple games, and a year later I'm over there, and he says, "Bill, come see what you bought me." I go outside and he's got a new Ferrari. He says, "My game bought that for him." And I'm going, "I'm still driving a Chevrolet." I'm going, I guess I should have my own company over here, because I went to Boots when I first got there because he wasn't available, and they said, "We don't have any MicroProse games." I said, "Well, you see this list? The top 7 are MicroProse games." She says, "No, that's US Gold." I said, "Yeah, but they're my games, and if you don't let me see your buyer, I'm going to take them all off and not sell them to you anymore." All of a sudden, I saw their buyer.
Yeah.
So US Gold got famous on our games in the late 80s. Guess who else got famous? Who got started? Ubisoft. They were a distributor of ours. In fact, their first successes came to distributing MicroProse products. So we were making 7%. They're making 93%. I'm going. So I put an ad that says, "Looking for a person who likes fast money, fast activity, and fast girls," or something stupid like that. And I get 400 resumes. I was in one of your squares in a hotel. I was getting resumes under the door. Finally, I get a knock on the door. And I told him, "Just slip it under the door." And I go, "Hello." And he says, "My name is Stuart Bell, and you don't need to talk to these other people. I'm going to do it for you." And Stuart was very outgoing. So he told me we're going to, because I had to leave because I've been trying to get all this done. And I came back about a month later and he said, "Well, I've got the perfect place for our office." I said, "Where's that?" He said, "The software distribution capital of Europe." I'm going, "Yay." And I find out it's Tetbury, England. And why was it Tetbury?
I know this story. It's just a few miles down the road from here. It's because he lived there.
He did. And I said, "I thought you said it was software distribution capital of the world." He goes, "Well, it will be." I ended up firing Stuart because he was a good salesman, but he couldn't handle money. And he thought all our money was his money. And but he did a good job growing the company for us for a while. And then we were at a consumer electronics show, and I see Sir Clive because we're talking about doing Z80 games. And of course, I think the UK office tried to do a couple. I don't remember exactly what the deal was. So he says, "Bill, I'm having a party at my house at 9 o'clock tonight. Would you like to come?" I show up, and it's Sir Clive and his butler. Sir Clive's got a robe on. There's nobody there but me and his butler. And we have a drink. And he says, "Well, we're going to have a nice party." I go, "Sir Clive, for everybody else?" He says, "Oh, it's just you and me." I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I got another party to go to at 9:30. I got up and left. I mean, he wasn't nasty. He just like, it was a little creepy,
And
you know?
there wasn't a deal on the table. There wasn't a deal to be done. This was just a social invite. Okay.
Yeah. So we go on, and I fire Stewart
Right. Okay.
because he spent 200,000 pounds taking his girlfriend to the Seychelles,
That'll do it. Yeah.
and he had no accounting for it. And he said, "Oh, I was just, I thought it was extra pay for me." So I had to hire Adrian Parr to come in and be the financial officer. And Adrian says, a few months later, a year later, I don't remember what it was, that Stewart's still not doing his expense accounts. So I take the financials away from Stewart completely. It's only Adrian can authorize things. And about 2 weeks later, I call over there. A week later, I call over there and say, "Stewart, you're fired in terms of the financials." The next Monday, he calls me, and I said, "What do you call me? It's kind of a strange time for you to be calling me, because he usually called me at night when he'd had a cocktail or two with my financial officer, which I didn't know at the time." And he said, "Well, I'm here in Hunt Valley." He used my credit card to fly all the way to Hunt Valley so I get a meeting with the president of Atari who I'd hired. And the president of Atari, Gene Lipkin, came into my office and says, "I'm going on vacation next Monday." I said, "No, I didn't know that yet." And I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "Morgantown, West Virginia." I said, "What's in Morgantown?" Because my parents met in Morgantown. He says, "Federal penitentiary."
Ah.
He'd forgot to pay his taxes.
Oh,
He blew $2 million of white powder up his nose and didn't pay any taxes on it. So he went to jail for 6 months at one of those, things where only rich guys go to, one of those things. And he kept calling my guys, and he talked them all into quitting and raised $1.5 million from a coin op company, since he knew the coin op guys. And Stewart said, "Oh, by the way, I'm here to quit because I'm joining Gene in a new company." So I go into my financial officer, says, "Hey, I hear they're starting a new company." He says, "Oh yeah, Bill, I'm considering going." I said, "You're fired." So I get on a limo, and I'm going to the airport to go take care of things over there and appoint Adrian as the managing director. And I think about it, none of them know how to make games. So I go back to my VP of development and said, uh, "Are you thinking about joining this group?" He says, "Well, I'm still thinking about it." I said, "You're fired." So I fired 4 guys in 3 days. And we had to start over, and we were trying to get ready to go public. So it was an intense time.
And it's around 1991, you did touch on it there, the F-15 coin-op that you developed. What prompted you to try and break into the coin-op industry?
Because Nintendo wanted me to pay them $1 million for 100,000 cartridges. And I knew what happened to Atari when the cartridges didn't sell.
Right.
I got offered the first Nintendo license in America. Okay. Too stupid again to say yes. Because I was making games for $1.20. I didn't want to pay $10 in advance when it was 6 months before you got the cartridges. Didn't make sense. And the coin-op, I figured our Strike Eagle was so popular, we'd sold 10 million copies, we could do it, because there was that Afterburner game out at the time.
Yes, yeah.
And I thought Afterburner was an arcade game, and we could make it a little more realistic. And I got videos. It was great fun, I thought, and it made money, but not a ton.
Were there any other arcade games, or was it just F-15?
Oh, yeah, we did. There were 3 others, and I'll remember here in a minute. In fact, I had them all in my garage where I lived in Cary, North Carolina, and a former employee came and bought them all.
Okay.
I think he paid me $200 each or something. There was a 4-player one we had, and we had a space game, which was really Strike Eagle with, spaceships. So, but they all did okay, but they weren't the big winners like Afterburner was. And it's another story. We get to 89, when the ex decides she wants to split whatever money we got, because she didn't like being a CEO's wife. She's a great lady, gave me 3 beautiful kids, but she didn't want to be part of it. And then Sid didn't want to be a partner because he knew I was thinking about taking the company public, and he didn't want to sign any of those papers. I'm not sure if Sid was actually an American citizen at the time.
Oh, okay.
I think his family snuck across the Canadian border, but I don't want to start that rumor, okay? But it was very clear he didn't want to sign anything. So we made a deal, and we paid him $2 million, and we gave him a 15% commission and $150,000 salary. And do anything you want. And he did a couple games. None of them really, CPU Bach, covert action, but none of them were as big as the early games. Pirates and Civilization were great games, and Civilization was stolen from Avalon Hill. You've heard that story, right?
Yeah, the board game makers. Was it Civilization and one other game?
Pirates too, and
Pirates. Yeah.
Railroad Tycoon. All three came from Avalon Hill. And Mister Eric Dodd calls me, says, "Bill, Sid's stealing my game." So I said, "We better get together and talk about this. I'll catch you for lunch." And so I went and got him. We went to lunch. I gave him 3 martinis. I had him sign a card that said I could ship Civilization as long as I put a card for his board game in my games, and he put a card for my computer games in his board games. There was $100 million lawsuit after I left the company, but we'd signed a deal. 1991, we went public, okay, and we paid off all our debts, including the debts from the coin-op game. And the investment bankers wanted me to put a new board in to look like more of a company. So I put some financial types in. They knew nothing about gaming. And in February of 92, they said, "Bill, you need to take a break. You're too hands on. We need a manager."
Okay.
So I hired a really smart guy in West Pointer. He's passed now, but he was a really good guy. Played golf with him, smart as a whip. Ran the East Coast division of Sears, where they made equipment. They made hammers and pliers and all that kind of stuff. And he lived in Hunt Valley where we were, and I hired him to run the company. And I took a 6 month sabbatical. I went and spoke at various business schools. I played a lot of golf around the world, and I'm having a good time. And he's got 8 games due on October 1, 1992. Guess how many we ship on October 1, 1992? And we had a bonus program that I'd give 25% of the first year's revenue to the team that put it together. That could mean they double or triple their salary. He thought I was being nasty to the software guys because they work a little slow in the beginning, a little bit faster in the middle, and like hell for the last 2 months, 100 hours a week. But it was up to them because every week they were less, they lost 5%. So October 1, they got 25%. A week later, they got 20%. And then if they didn't get out to 1 November, they got zero. So he changed it to overtime. Now, when you have overtime doing software, you don't get software done because you can always think of a new thing, make the explosion better, make the airplane better. You can keep going. We shipped 1 game December 15th, F-15 Strike Eagle 3. So we got 600 employees around the world. Not good for cash flow. We make a deal with GE Electric. And then my financial people say, "Oh, we misstated earnings. We counted inventory." So GE said, "We're out of here." So I almost committed suicide in April of 93.
I've heard this story in an interview. So you were thinking of cashing in that key man insurance policy.
$10 million.
Yeah. And that was with a view to
And
just making sure everyone got paid. And yeah, it was that
yep,
dark for you at that point.
yep, that's pretty stupid. But that's what I was thinking because I was been drinking. We were in Las Vegas, and I decided to stand on the edge of our deck, and just stupid. So anyway, my CFO talked me down, and I went looking for money, and ended up talking to a whole bunch of people. 3 people made offers in the company, and it was all for $10 million. I had to leave the company, and they had to be in control. So I ended up doing it with Kleiner Perkins, who was an investor in Spectrum Holobyte. And Vinod Khosla and I then negotiated for the next year, trying to get the rest of my stock. So brought Gilman Louie in and ran the company, and it went downhill after that. After they sold it to Hasbro and then Infogrames, and just went away. But it was very sad for me. I was on the board, but I was told to be quiet. So whenever I had a suggestion, they said, that's the old way we're doing it. So it was pretty sad.
You found is it Interactive Magic after MicroProse?
Yes, yes, because Interactive Magic went away. It used to be a company. iMagic was a company before us, and then it went bankrupt and went away. In fact, I know the guy who was running it at the time, and I'm still friends with him, and he's 85 years old, and I talk to him regularly on LinkedIn. I'll think of his name in a minute, but I liked their concept, and I thought we were Interactive Magic. And then when I got ready to sell, I went from 0 to 25 million in 3 years with an investment of $1 million. That's when the industry was only 25% of how big it is right now.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a pretty good run. And what happened is one of my YPO friends said, let's go to Raleigh. We can play golf down there, and it's a great place to start a business, and you can steal some people from IBM because that's where their headquarters were in the U.S., at least their development headquarters. So I went down there, and I got 10 company presidents offering people, machines, place to work, because they all sold directly to IBM. And we were the only retail seller, and they wanted to learn about the retail business. And it's cloudy and awful in Baltimore. I get to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is only like a 10-hour car ride, and it's 70 degrees and sunny, and we go play golf. And he really wants me to start a company. He ended up being my company president for 3 years, and we did very well growing the company. We loved it, and we did lots of flying games, and we just sold some of them to MicroProse because they're going to try and redo the F-16 game and a couple of them. And they're fighting with a couple of people that own those games.
Let's round it off back where we started then. So MicroProse has returned about 5 years ago. Are you involved in the new MicroProse?
I was, and I'm friends with David Licchetti. He asked me to come over there, as I said, and Denise and I went over there, and we had a nice visit. But he doesn't like any criticism, and he asked me to review his games. I said, well, you can fix this, this, and this. And he says, Bill, I can't pay you anymore. Actually, he didn't like me telling him he needed to put more training in the games, more tutorials. He needed to make you have fun in the first 30 seconds, not figure out what you're going to do, because I don't know if you played Strike Eagle 2, but on Strike Eagle 2, in the first 3 seconds, you go, blah, 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 blow something up, and it goes, yay! So I was always trying to make you have fun in the first 30 seconds of game and make it so you had to have more learning in the game so you'd get better, and then give you the rewards, medals, promotions, whatever else we could do to make you feel happy. And guess who was on the top of the high score screen for Gunship?
It was you, was it?
And it really was true. Because I flew with the Army guys. I told you, the Army helicopter guys, and they let me fly once in a while, which is a strange experience for a fixed wing guy.
Fantastic. Right. I'll let you get on, Bill. It's been a magnificent career, one that's given me a huge amount of joy. So thank you very much for your games.
I made lots of good decisions and lots of not so good ones.
You can't call them all right. You've done all right for yourself, Bill. You've done all right for yourself.
And we're still going. We never give up. And I've got 18 grandbabies I have to teach to play golf. And if you give me 2 hours, I can teach you to be a good golfer. 2 hours.
I'll take you up on that if I'm in Florida. And if you're ever in Tetbury again, come and visit our museums, because we're always looking for guest speakers at the museums. So we would love to.
Well, I don't like talking. You can tell.
Thank you so much.
Take care, sir.